call the TCC meeting to order. Thank you for everyone who came out this afternoon. Some housekeeping reminders before we get started. This meeting will be live streamed for public viewing on YouTube at ecrc.org/YouTube. Please remember to turn on your mic only when speaking. Keep your mic muted when you're not speaking. And please keep the microphone close to your mouth and project your voice so that we can make sure we hear exactly what you have to say. To help online participants, please identify yourself each time you speak or vote. And access to meeting information can be found on the ECRC website, www.ecrc.org/OWTPO meetings. And with that, we'll begin the meeting. We approve the agenda. The agenda is set. We don't need to approve the agenda. So is there any changes or to the agenda that we have? Anyone have anything out of the ordinary we need to change? Not hearing anything. Public forum. Did we receive any speaker cards?
So I don't have any speaker cards right now, but I believe we do have a member that wants to speak. And I want to go ahead and tell you that when we get to the presentation for the long-range transportation plan, we will have a fair amount of public comments that will be read. You also have copies of public comments from the long-range plan, but those are in conjunction with the process throughout the whole process of the long-range plan. I believe, Mr. Powell, did you want to speak?
He's going to speak after.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Okay, moving along to item D, FDOT update. Mr. Paul.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The department has two items to update this committee on today. It's a couple of public hearings that are coming up in November. First one will be on US 331, the addition of signals at the interchange at 331, and some traffic operations improvements on 331 going north through Defuniak. This public meeting is scheduled for Thursday, November 4th from 5:30 to 6:30 at the Defuniak Springs Community Center on 10th Street. This will be a hybrid public meeting, so you'll also have an option to view it online. The DOT's website to register and view this public meeting is nwflroads.com. That's nwflroads.com. The second public meeting is on Racetrack Road improvements. We have intersection improvements scheduled for Marwalt Drive and Denton Boulevard. This is scheduled for Tuesday, November 9th, also from 5:30 to 6:30. It will be held at the Trinity United Methodist Church on Racetrack Road. It will also have the hybrid option, and again, it's at our DOT website, nwflroads.com. With that concludes the DOT's portion of the update. We can discuss the bridge issue now if you'd like.
Yes, Mr. Powell from Walton County Public Works approached me earlier to talk about an additional improvement at 331. At this time, I'd like for him to explain it, and Mr. Paul has some comments after that. Chance, if you would go ahead.
Madam Chair, thank you. This is Chance Powell. It's been discussed in the county with the Sheriff's Department and with at the commission level about lighting on the 331 bridge. Given the alignment of the bridge and some horizontal alignment changes within that bridge north to south, and there's been some incidents on the bridge, I guess, and we're having a higher level of pedestrians on that. We'd like to look and see what the opportunities are to have some bridge lighting installed there.
Thank you, Chance. Mr. Paul?
Yes, Walton County had previously brought this to our attention back in January of 2020. Our design office looked into this, and the opportunities we have currently available to us would fall back into the TPO to prioritize a bridge lighting project in their capacity list. We don't have a funding source currently available that will allow us to do that outside of the TPO process. So We would again recommend Walton County work with TPO staff to coordinate on the inclusion of this project in the long-range plan and ultimately in the project priority list. I would like to say, though, I think the long-range plan probably has a component that discusses safety in general, and maybe that'll be sufficient enough since this isn't really a big ticket capacity type project. So hopefully we could expedite the inclusion in the long-range plan, but ultimately it would have to get on the project priority list and pushed up high enough that the department could consider funding it.
Thank you, Mr. Pop. Michelle?
There was some discussion this morning at the TCC about a different pot of money for safety. Is that not, would that be?
You know, when the department looked into this request last January, the safety funds were not eligible to be used for the lighting of the bridge.
Thank you. And we'll move right along to the consent agenda. We have before us the approval of the September 2021 meeting minutes. Has everyone on the committee had opportunity to review those minutes? I would assume by your silence that's a resounding yes. So at this point, I would entertain a motion to approve the September 21 meeting minutes of the TCC as presented. Can I get a motion?
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
We have a motion by Kyle to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
I have a motion by Kristen to second. Is there any further discussion of the motion as presented? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to let you know that Chris Wallace with the City of Defuniak Springs is sitting at the table, and he just got confirmation that he has been appointed to this committee. So just wanted to let you know he is now a voting member.
Delightful. Welcome, Chris. So glad you're here. For those of you who don't know, this is Chris Wallace, who is the new Growth Management Director of Defuniak Springs, and we welcome you to participate in this. It's very important if you've got transportation improvements that need to be made in your jurisdiction that you participate here so we can help. Glad to have you. Action item F, we have enclosure A, all committees, consideration of resolution 21-15, and this is to be presented. Brian, will this be by you or by Christie? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The department is bringing forth our tentative work program for fiscal years 23 through 27. The work program reports were provided in your agenda package, and also TPO staff sent them out separately as a reminder a couple of days ago, I believe. What I'll be doing is going over these reports, but I'll only go over the new projects or projects with any significant changes. However, if you've got any questions on projects within your county or region, we'll be glad to go over them at this time. But with that being said, I'll just again go over the new projects in the Okaloosa County region first. We were able to add a new resurfacing project. This goes from the Santa Rosa County line to west of Josie Road. We put the design in fiscal year 23 with construction in fiscal year 25. We were able to add a new PD&E project to the department's work program. This is US 98 built from Bill Parkway to Brooks Bridge, or better known as Around the Mound. Our transportation partner in Fort Walton Beach was able to put up $1 million towards the PD&E. Department matched that with funding that now fully funds the PD&E in next fiscal year 23. We were able to fund the TPO's top transportation project priority, which is the area-wide traffic signal system operations. That's $400,000 in the new 5th year, which is fiscal year 27. We'll be resurfacing Danny Warfel Way from US 98 to the Mid-Bay Bridge. That will be designed in 23 with construction in 25. We'll be adding some dynamic message signs along US 98 to the east and west of Danny Warfel Way. These will be at the entrance to Kelly Plantation and Destin Commons. So there we'll have some dynamic message signs to incorporate into our IT efforts along 98. We were able to add an incentive phase for the Brooks Bridge replacement. We have a $5 million bonus phase added in our fiscal year 27 to encourage a timely completion of that project. We have an I-10 resurfacing project going from the Shoal River Bridge to 285. That has design in 23 and construction in 25. I believe the final project we have in the Okaloosa County area is a sidewalk project. This is on Lewis Street from Bill Parkway to Mayflower Avenue. This will be a lap with Okaloosa County. It's for the installation of 5-foot sidewalks on the south side of Lewis Street. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions on those or any of the projects in the Okaloosa County area.
Any comments, questions, or concerns?
Say, I noticed there was plenty of Highway 85 and 90 projects, so that was definitely exciting for the north half of the county. I did have one question about the sidewalk projects phase 2. It was on page 11 of it. We weren't sure which sidewalk that was, because I know there'd been a bunch of different sidewalk projects submitted.
We're showing in our brief description we have in our work program. I'll have to defer to the project manager for a detailed description, but it appears we'll be working with Okaloosa County to install sidewalks on Industrial Drive,
Okay.
Long Drive, and Commerce Drive are the 3 areas within those projects, or within that project.
That answered my question. I'll get with Scott then. Thanks.
Any further questions for Mr. Paul?
Okay, seeing none, we'll move to Walton County. Same situation, we'll go to the new projects. We'll say we only have 2 new projects in Walton County, but they won the prize for the largest project. The first one is the Signal System Operation and Maintenance Funds. That's $200,000 in fiscal year 27. That's the ongoing request for the ITS support. But we were able to add the design of the widening of US 98 from County Road 38 to the Bay County line. This is in our new 5th year, fiscal year 27, and the design for that corridor, the estimate is $16.5 million that we were able to program in that year for that. That PD&E is that PD&E kicks off next year, fiscal year 23. So as we get into that, you'll see this corridor segmented into likely 2, maybe even 3 individual segments, and then the design split accordingly. But with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions for the Walton County projects.
Brian, there's one project that I saw on there earlier today, and it was the State Road 83. I believe it was fiscal year 24 from Highway 90 north to, I believe it's Gum Creek Church Road, or I believe.
I've got one 83 from south of County Road 185. From 90 to south of County Road 185, Gum Creek Church Road.
It's State Road 83 from State Road 10 US 90 to south of 185 Gum Creek Church Road. It's my understanding that that's going to include a signal at Sunrise Road. Are you familiar with that?
I don't have that in my notes, but that doesn't necessarily mean that a signal's not being included in that. I just get limited notes from our work program staff, so I can check on that and let you know that.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sunrise Road, is that what you said?
It's Sunrise and 1883. It's
Okay.
the intersection of those 2 roads.
Any further questions or comments from Mr. Paul? Hearing none, we're at the part of the program where we need to take a vote as to whether or not to recommend the adoption of Resolution 21-15. accepting the FDOT's fiscal years 2023-2027 tentative work program. Need a motion?
So I motion that we accept the 23 to 27 work program.
I have a motion from Kyle Lusk. Is there a second?
Second.
Got a second from Chance. Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is passed unanimously. All right, and we move into presentations. There's no action required of this committee on these, but I'd like to introduce Ms. Kristen Schell, the AICP from the Walton County Planning Department, who is doing a presentation on the Walton County Mobility Plan. Kristen?
Thank you, Matilda. Jill, is she able to pull up the? Sorry to everybody that already sat through this morning. Get to do it 3 times, right? Poor Mary Beth. Yeah. So this project started a few years ago, really when Walton County updated our comprehensive plan. We began that project in 2017, and we were looking at alternatives to the proportionate fair share system and the creation of a long-range transportation plan, which is required, as you know, by statute. So we've been working on it for well over 2 years, almost 3. And earlier in September, the County Commission voted to accept the Walton County Mobility Plan. And I'm just going to hit some highlights here. Obviously, this will be discussed later at today's TPO. But I wanted an update from you guys on where we were in terms of getting the projects into the needs plan. Was the consultant able to get, or I saw there was a lot more in there today than there was last time I looked, but.
Well, Corey is here from HDR, and we probably have Jill and Matt on the line that can address that.
Hey, this is Corey. Matt, if you can give us an update on that. The short answer is yes, I think all the projects are in there,
Okay.
but I don't want to speak for Matt.
Right, I think to Corey's point, we have added project. Are y'all getting some feedback? Well,
You're good, go ahead.
all right, well, we have added projects. You can, we'll go through that as part of our presentation, show all the needs that have been brought in from the Walton Mobility Plan. But yes, we've taken that on, and we've also updated our evaluation criteria to evaluate those projects as well. So.
Okay, great.
Those two have taken place.
Yep. Okay, great. I just, in looking at it this morning, it was hard to see if everything was in there, but I could tell that definitely a lot more was in there than our last steering committee meeting. But just to hit the highlights of Walton's plan, it does contain a complete streets sort of overarching set of policy. Most of the projects that are in there look to add bicycle and pedestrian facilities as well as transit routes and hubs for South Walton. We looked quite extensively for a secondary north-south route that would enhance our cities and the economic development that they have planned and the things that are going on there. We worked, the county commission actually met jointly with each of the city councils, which was really great. And we tried to listen and incorporate, looking at transportation from a one Walton point of view. We prioritized the State Road 20 US 331 intersection with a number of improvements that relieve that intersection. And then another big picture item is the alternative route and corridors to US 98. So we hope to preserve the capacity and economic development along that corridor, the commercial operations along that corridor with an alternative route as the county continues to grow and develop. I mentioned this this morning to the Citizens Committee about the very large development that Walton County has on our eastern border with Bay County. We are part of the Bay-Walton Sector Plan, and this development contains about 170,000 entitled units. 27,000 approximately of those are in Walton County. And if you just look at that development, just to put it into perspective in terms of population, it could potentially be 300,000 new people to that area of Northwest Florida, which is like a new city like Pensacola. So it's just important to keep that into perspective. So far, they've got there are 2 new DSAPs that I just received, detailed special area plans for the Bay County side, and Walton County has 1 approved, which is 5,800 units. So that was kind of, feeding into our future planning, looking at, the alternative corridor to 98, as well as, the alternate north-south connection. So the Bay-Walton Sector Plan contains the West Bay Parkway, and that connection over to 79 would be another north-south route in the future, hopefully. So, okay, this is just kind of what the mobility plan looks like. This is the Funiac area, and I know that Councilman Valley hopefully will talk about this a little bit at the next meeting. But there are, and when he goes over, I'm not going to get into this because I realized this morning that when your consultant goes over, he goes through the projects pretty well. So we're just going to keep going. Yeah. Hitting the highlights. So we did meet with the city of Paxton, and they're not real interested in widening 331 through the core. The city of Defuniak is interested in making some alternate route connections and connecting 83 down to 331. So you will see that included. We looked at connecting 81 from I-10 to US 98, but that is not currently in the mobility plan. Rather, the West Bay Parkway connection to Watersound to 79 is. And then we've also prioritized some improvements to State Road 83, which connects Highway 20 to I-10, and that is important because the 20 East corridor for Walton County is a growth area. So again, looking to prioritize or at least plan transportation facilities with the mindset of land use and future growth that's occurring, as well as economic development within the county. Okay. Freeport, he's going to go through those projects. The Marquee Way Extension, just go one more. Yeah. The Marquee Way Extension is prioritized here. And this is really looking at the city of Freeport's sewer capacity projects and development opportunities in the city, and just moving the tourist population up and down 331 as our only north-south facility right now, and just getting those through that bottleneck intersection. So just moving on quickly to South Walton and Miramar. So we spent a lot of time in the mobility plan, obviously talking about South Walton, especially the 38 corridor, because that corridor is an economic driver for Walton County. We have approximately 4 million or over 4 million seasonal visitors to the 38 area each year. And so as you can imagine, that puts a large constraint on our residents' ability to kind of get around during that time period, which seems to be widening out months every year. So there is sort of a general recognition in here that we wouldn't add additional automobile lanes to the 38 corridor, but that we would take a complete streets approach there and add bicycle and pedestrian and transit capacity where possible. And I don't think that ultimately has been decided what that would look like, so there's just some complete street language here. Recognition that land is constrained down there and parking is limited, so finding places for people to leave their vehicles and use alternative modes is central in this plan. The Forest Connection Road is in the LRTP. I know you will hear some citizen comment on that later. It's currently in the draft of the LRTP. And just to give a little bit of information on that road, the county has invested in the road. It breaks up about an 8-mile segment along, I think it's 8 miles, where you cannot get off of 30A essentially, because if you look at 30A, about every 4 miles there's a north-south connector to 98, and then through that stretch there is no way to get off of 30A, and so it's kind of a midway point that breaks up a really long stretch. And as we continue to grow and develop, the functionality or the movement of people on 30A is critical. So, again, I've already talked about the alternative routes on 98. And in all of our public meetings, that was more desirable than 8-laning Highway 98 or any more lanes on 98 past what's currently being looked at or programmed. That may change, but that's currently the feedback that we got moving through this planning effort. So this is what the transit and mobility hubs look like for South Walton. There's also a Miramar Sandestin plan. The blue areas are the only ones considered for large-scale automobile parking, like a parking garage type situation. And then you have the routes actually in the red for the 30A corridor with basically places for people to embark and disembark a transit vehicle, whatever that may be. The yellow areas are a little bit more robust that could have, transit circulators or other micro-transit or even rideshare or ways for people to get around in a different way. So these were based on how we saw people moving on the corridor. These routes were based on actual data, the way that we see people travel on the 38 corridor when they're staying on the corridor or they're coming into the corridor to visit. So we wanted to mimic those sort of short trips that people make and hopefully provide other options that would be fun and desirable for the visiting population. This, here you can really see sort of the parallel corridor for US 98. You can also see the Powerline Trail, and he's going to talk about that, I know, in the next presentation some. This is partially within the Bay Walton Sector Plan, and we've been trying to stay diligent with that development and making sure that the alternate to 98 remains as it continues to grow and develop over there. That's the Miramar Complete Streets. There's a two-way facility there over in the red. Keep going. And again, transit hubs. This is the blue being the only large-scale parking facility identified in the plan currently. Okay, I think that's about it. So there's really a lot here. There's about 200 projects in here. It's pretty extensive, and we know that it's a living document and we'll continue to grow and change and hopefully grow as we interject these projects into the TPO process and explore alternate funding at the county level. Okay. Any questions?
Thank you, Kristen. Moving right along on our agenda, Jill Nobles will be presenting enclosures C and D. Jill?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members. This is the 2045 long-range transportation plan draft update for the needs plan and cost feasible plan. As y'all know, every 5 years the TPO updates the LRTP. In that, there is a needs plan, which is all the projects that are needed, and then there's the cost feasible plan, which are all the projects that we can foreseeably afford through the year 2045. These list of projects are very important because every year we take that cost feasible plan list, and that makes up the annual project priorities, which the TPO adopts on a yearly basis and gives the FDOT to create their 5-year work program. Next slide. We are nearing the end of the process, and we've, sorry, Ray, there's a bad feedback.
Let's try again, Jill.
Try to power through. Okay, thanks, Ray. Sorry if I sounded off. We started this process last summer with looking at how the existing conditions are currently operating and developing goals and objectives with our steering committee to guide us in the development of this plan. And then we've developed criteria to evaluate the projects in the plan. And then there's financial resources to look at funding coming in to afford these projects over the next 20 years. And then we've got the needs plan, the cost feasible plan that we're nearing completion and going to be asking for adoption in December. So for the needs plan projects that you're going to see by Matt or next, these projects are capacity projects. So widening roads as well as complete streets and corridor studies. It also includes major intersection improvements, not just something minor that can go through our transportation system management process, but those bigger intersections that will require, maybe right like that. And we are expanded to all of the transportation. We're also looking at transit, bicycle, and pedestrian modes. Also, all the projects that are on this plan will need state or federal funding. So we're not looking for a local neighborhood project, but any project that would need state or federal funding. And then these projects must also be on facilities that are on the federal functional classification system or directly help that system. Next slide. For the cost feasible plan projects that you will see, like I said, the cost feasible plan has to be fiscally constrained, so we are looking at a budgeted plan. And then there's two types of projects, the SIS projects and the non-SIS projects. For the SIS projects, you are not going to see those mapped out. We are following directly from the FDOT SIS funding plan for those. So those are just not, we haven't mapped them out on the interactive map as far as the cost feasible plan. So you will see 3 scenarios for the non-SIS projects. Next slide. The 3 scenarios are, scenario 1 is the priority. So look at the previously adopted project priorities. And scenario 2 will be the evaluation criteria. It is based on the approved ranked criteria for road capacity projects. And then scenario 3 is the multi-modal scenario. It's also for capacity projects, but there's a little bit more interest in rising to the top of those projects that are multimodal, so bike head, complete streets, corridor management, and even regional trail program. The steering committee is going to meet again in November to help us finalize the hybrid scenario. But next, I think we're going to go over the Ray to do the public outreach update as far as the needs plan outreach that was conducted earlier, and then we'll go over to Matt to go through the project.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Chair, TCC members. For your new faces, I am Ray Emery McPhee, one of your public involvement tour guides, helping you through our survey results today. And we will dig in. So on our first slide, we asked participants what their highest need was, and they rated that on a scale from highest to lowest, 1 to 5. And you'll see here that they indicated comparably equal rates of high serious concern for all modes or all methods of transportation improvements. And then on our next slide, we asked participants what their most significant concern was over the next 25 years. So looking at a little bit farther, they said the following of their transportation concerns, the first, of course, being the increased traffic, congestion, and delays, followed by lack of accessible mobility choices. I do want to go over that fourth highest, which is the other concerns. We had 5 comments written into that box for them to further explain their situations. The first participant, quote, they did not want a plan to, or they didn't think the plan was moving people effectively across both counties. They wanted, quote, a transit system to move people around 98. And this commenter also indicated that Highway 98 is, quote, not safe for bikes, low-speed vehicles, and pedestrians. They would prefer to see a mobility plan that is not car-centric. The second voiced concerns for increasing population and houses without enough parking. The third, increased population and not enough infrastructure and roadways. The fourth, allowing more people to build and we are losing nature. The fifth, reliability of our public transportation system. Now on slide 3, we asked a couple of questions to figure out how much mobility would play into the needs of your communities. And you can see here that 90% of users are currently car drivers. We see 6 options that we laid before the participants, but only 3 are available on this pie chart because the other 3 had 0 nominations. No one currently uses them. On our 4th slide here, we see that when given the opportunity to dream a little bit bigger and think, if given the choice, what would you prefer to use? That's when we saw a few more diverse answers, and we see that they would use bikes, they would use buses, they would walk, or as one user indicated in the other field, they would like a streetcar on a rail through both counties. Now on our next slide, we go and see what best determines why they use that mode of transportation that they use. So those 90% of our users that are car users use it predominantly because it's reliable, it's accessible, it is in location to their where they live, and it's available every day. On this next slide, we then asked, I'm so sorry, we gave another write-in box where they could tell us any projects that they felt needed to be added or removed from the list that was needed as it stands now. We had 12 suggested additions and 25 suggested removed projects. That is the printout that is there before you. You'll see those 12 and those 25 suggestions, as well as 3 emails that we received from the public directly to either a transportation planner or PI in general. As mentioned earlier in the presentation, we're going to move on to public comment that was received as it relates to the needs plan. Mr. Robert Raymond commented and said, as a disabled citizen living in the most excluded and underserved area of the Okaloosa-Walton TPO, in quotes, based on the equity analysis map, I would ask the board to review projects falling within the most underserved areas with special considerations towards leveling the playing field for our most vulnerable citizens. And then Reynolds Henderson said, as we have spoken about in the past, I would like to reiterate my support for the Complete Streets project on Highway 98 into Funiac Springs. Ashley Smith requested no new roads through the forest. She encourages us to reject the needs plan list project A28, the Highway 98 and 30A connector road. Celeste Kobina wrote in the same objection and said that this road should be removed from the needs list. The proposed highway would go through Point Washington State Forest. This conservation land was purchased with Preservation 2000 funds, and it is used to restrict the conservation and passive recreation. During the ongoing PD&E study, an agency meeting was held in May of 2019. All state and federal agencies and utility companies in attendance rejected a road through Point Washington State Forest. In August of the same year, a public hearing was held and nearly all in attendance spoke against a road through Point Washington State Forest. Walton County citizens have continued to object to a road fragmenting the conservation land. Remove Project A-28 Highway 98 to 30A connector from the needs list. Mark Messerly said no new roads through the forest. I am so sorry for that. Carolyn Zonia said, I am writing to object to needs list project A-28, Highway 98 to 30A connector road. She says, "It is environmentally inappropriate to carve roads through these last remaining forest spaces. Thank you." Beverly Otson is our last public commenter, and they said, "Please reject the Needs Project A-28 proposed connector road between 30A and Highway 98. This road would do extensive and irreparable damage to the forest. It would not improve traffic on 30A, but would bring more traffic to this area. Walton County should address the many options for mitigating traffic on 30A without destroying the valuable ecosystem of the forest, one of the area's major assets." And that concludes our public input findings. I am open to any questions you may have. And seeing none, I will thank you for your time, and I'm going to hand it back over to Jill. She's going to go over some next steps, and then we're going to look at some maps.
Thanks, Ray. All right, so the next few steps, as we close out this process in December, earlier this month, we had a steering committee meeting to, start looking at those draft, cost feasible plan scenarios. And then we're here to present those today. We're asking for all comments, be submitted by November 24th. In November, we have the steering committee meeting, on November 9th. We're gonna really get into, that final hybrid scenario with the committee. And then we'll be doing another round of public outreach specifically for the cost feasible plan. And then we'll be back in December for adoption of both the needs plan and the cost feasible plan. I'm gonna hand it over to Matt now. He's gonna take control of the screen and kind of guide us through the interactive map showing not only the needs plan, but also the cost feasible plan scenarios.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Matt Weisenfeld. I've been working with the ECRC staff and the TPO to help develop this needs plan and cost feasible. And today I'm serving as a tour guide and an interactive map specialist, kind of to walk us through the needs plan as well as the cost feasible plan. And at this point, you should be seeing my screen open to the interactive map. And you can see the entirety of the OWTPO. And that there's projects planned throughout the region. You can see on the right side of my screen that the needs plan that we're really broken into in terms of the mappable projects, 5 types of projects. They're the capacity projects, the bed type projects, intersection projects, which are generally shown in as circles, the complete streets or corridor studies, and transit projects. And so at this Zoom level, you can see the region, and you can see that there's many things that have been identified in our meetings with all the city and county representatives across the board. But what I'm going to do to make it a little more clear and to zoom in on some of the projects is I'm going to look at it from quadrant by quadrant basis. And by that, I'll start in the Defuniak Springs area, and I'll work my way south along 331, then west along 98. And then back up State Road 85, and so to complete the circle and get through to Crestview. So in doing that, I'll go ahead and zoom in now to the Defuniak Springs, and there's more projects than I can highlight in today's presentation, but I wanted to give an idea of what the types of projects, how we brought them in, and how they're being looked at. And I think there's a couple things to see here that I really want to highlight. And one is that we have not only existing corridors like 83 in the northern portion of 331, but also corridors that could be. And I'll zoom into a couple options here. These are a variety of ways that have been presented to help connect 83 to the southern portion of 331 as a realignment to support the kind of the urban fabric of Defuniak Springs and the transportation options to travel from north to south in the area. You can see other examples of that throughout this area that have been brought forward as new projects. Zooming in a little bit closer, just one of the other examples, while there are a lot of capacity projects and any of the new roadways would qualify as that. One in particular is the US 90 Complete Streets project through the heart of Defuniak Springs, which would be an opportunity to revisit that corridor, provide better pedestrian and bicycle, and helps stitch together the options of going north to south across that corridor. And so the work on 83, the alternatives there could directly support also the complete streets in that local initiative. So I just wanted to give those pieces of context. Now I'm going to zoom back out a little bit, talk about it from the perspective of a needs plan. This is all the projects that could be desired over that period. But when I go ahead and turn that off, I'm going to go ahead and turn on the cost feasible scenarios. And as Joe mentioned, there are 3 scenarios. One is the current priorities, and that is just kind of advancing what we've put forward today so far. At this point, in this quadrant, or this area of the TPO boundaries, that didn't reveal any projects that would move forward and would be cost feasible. But we also have 2 other scenarios that it's all 3 of those combined are what we're looking at to create the hybrid scenario. And one is or scenario number 2, but another is the evaluation criteria. And that is going off of the document that was developed for this project to look at how we want roads to come forward. And the one that I would highlight here, and I hope that it's visible on screen there, but I'm going to go ahead and click it, is the section of US 331 south from US 90 to I-10. And it's one that was part of the Walton County Mobility Plan and brought in here. Now, it's in there in part as it's a capacity improvement project, but it also serves a variety of needs that were identified in that evaluation criteria. Now I'm going to go on to my 3rd scenario, and that 3rd scenario is something that leans multimodal. It looks to advance those projects and other projects where they can complement all the different forms of mobility. So as we look at that one, you do see a number of additional projects highlighted there, including some of those that help connect some of the areas back in, which is this one, which has the ability, while it's a capacity project in a new roadway, to connect a number of schools. But I did highlight early on this US 90 complete streets, and it's also one that comes forward in this multimodal scenario. I'll pause for a second. We take a look at the map overall. We can highlight all 3 of these at the same time, but this is kind of a live look into the tool that we've been using to bring together all this information and then to refine it into a visualization of these cost feasible scenarios. As promised, we will continue our tour southbound 331 toward the Freeport area. And the same tools are in place in terms of our colors and making sure we've identified all of these projects. And I think some of the ones that have been the most highlighted through this is this intersection of State Road 20 and US 331 and the need to address it from both a capacity as well as kind of a complete functionality in terms of safety and the ability to connect the community there. And there's one project to work right there. There's also projects to do things that are along the lines of widening and provide that additional physical capacity in terms of lanes on State Road 20, and that one's from King Road to Black Creek Boulevard. And another area that's been highlighted is the need for additional network, and one variety of that is the Marquee Way project, which would allow for connection from the community off the Shipyard Road all the way back around to US 331 and to avoid needing to make a turning maneuver at 20 and 331. So just some examples of some of the projects in that area. And I will zoom out a little bit to do my transition from the needs plan to the cost feasible. And I know I'm going back and forth between those, and they are interrelated in that the needs plan collects all the projects and the cost feasible scenarios to help us identify which ones would move forward. From the current priorities, you can see that State Road 20 project that I brought up while I was zoomed in. So that's that 4 lanes of capacity. You can see we start putting projected dollars and costs to it, and then help it be described in terms of how it can advance. Now moving to the second scenario, which is based off the evaluation criteria. You can see some more segments of that US 331 corridor that pop up. And those were brought in with the Walton Mobility plan. That a lot of those projects were brought into our LRTP project in this last cycle, and you can see the evaluation criteria did help it pop up as being a project that would meet those goals. Finally, that third scenario, that multimodal, and that State Road 20 project still remains in that scenario as being a key connection to the community. So it looks like we're refreshing fine on your screen, and I'm going to continue to push down into the Santa Rosa Beach area and some of the more coastal or seaside areas. You can see down here there are a number of projects that have come into the needs plan, really from the Walton Mobility Plan and the interest in creating those parallel routes and reducing the mobility pressure on 98 to circulate within the community. So you can see a number of the routes here. We also have a multimodal facility which we travel along the power line and provide a more comfortable bicycle and pedestrian experience traveling east-west throughout the community, as well as things that, as the transit circulator that was brought up in the Walton Mobility presentation. So those are the needs that have been identified in this area, and I think one of the largest from a traditional vehicular standpoint would be the need for this intersection at 331 and 98. But we'll go ahead and move away from that and go into the scenarios. From a current prioritization, there's not a lot there in the Santa Rosa Beach area, but from a evaluation use of that roadway, particularly both adapting to those peak periods where you do have peak flow and that you need additional green time, maybe east-west, to those less peak periods and providing for a quicker response for things like pedestrian calls. That's the type of system that can be put in there. Finally, the multimodal scenario, and I mentioned the parallel trail, but taking advantage of that utility easement to provide a better ped bike experience going east-west through the area. Map is keeping up, and I'm going to go ahead and go back to the needs plan, which you can see does have a considerable number more projects. Moving now east to west, as I head toward Destin along US 98, there's a number of projects in this area, and there's a couple I'd like to call out. That there's complete streets along Calhoun. There's ped bike projects throughout Destin that can help make circulating that area as a pedestrian or bicyclist an easier, more comfortable, and safer experience, as well as additional transit projects, including both low capacity and transit projects that would come up as I look at the Midway Bridge and that important connection between Nashville and Destin. So zooming out a little bit, again, moving back and forth, the needs plan being the more extensive set of needs, and then the cost feasible scenario showing what would come forward under the current scenarios, or the current priorities is transit project that would allow for express connection north-south over the Midway Bridge. Also the multi-use path connecting Destin to Fort Walton Beach. Those two are in the current priorities. Looking at it from an evaluation criteria standpoint, similar projects. We've got the transit, we have the multimodal facilities, as well as the adaptive signal control in this area. And then finally, we have our multimodal scenario, which goes back to some of those more ped bike options in Destin, the transit again over the bridge, as well as some of those transit circulators right along the beachfront. Okay. And continuing along, now we're over even further west into Fort Walton Beach. You can see that there's a number of corridors that are planned more for the complete streets. A number of the bike ped projects that will allow circulation throughout the neighborhoods so that it's more comfortable to walk within that area and kind of augment the travel along the major roadways, as well as looking at complete street along US 98. Another one to highlight there. Going back to some of the more capacity-related projects, there is an extension of Hollywood Boulevard out here as well to help complete that network. A number of intersection projects also exist. So hopefully it's clear to see on that side that there's a wide variety of projects that have been pulled in for Fort Walton Beach. Some of the current priorities, I talked about the Ped Bike Bridge out there, and I wanted to highlight that Hollywood Boulevard extension fit in that category. As far as the evaluation criteria, I'm clicking on it now with that Field Parkway, that corridor that is State Road 189, and getting that additional capacity along there is one that scores well. And then the multi-modal scenario, which encompasses a lot of the ped bike and those complete streets through that corridor were featured in that scenario. And I'll zoom in a little bit closer, as I know the details within some of those areas are a little more challenging to see, but it is that State Road 189 corridor from a transit project perspective and making it more connected into the core of Fort Walton Beach, as well as some of the ped bike. And we kept around the mound in this as a critical set of connections to the other potential projects.
Oh, one moment, I'm so sorry.
Michael, Kristen has a question. Michael,
I think I may have heard a question.
Yeah, so I noticed that 38 doesn't show up, in the multimodal scenario, and I'm just wondering if that is, but like smaller neighborhood streets in Fort Walton show up. What would be causing that? Is that the way we have it worded, or?
So I think one of the smaller, as you've seen, smaller is that they really are a combination of projects, but I believe that the question is specific about these transit projects down here.
Well, it doesn't show up, 38, did it show up as complete streets? I thought it didn't. So, that trail along 38 is on the state trail network. It's one of the key pieces to the east-west panhandle portion. I'm just wondering if it's something we need to do differently and how we have that worded.
No, we will go back and look at that and get it on there. We want to work with you one-on-one too to make sure that what's in your mobility plan is actually reflected on here. So if that's one that we've missed, we'll make sure to get it.
That's a real big one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say like Corey's comment that we do think that we do need to discuss some of the Walton mobility. We try to put it all in the needs plan, but if you do not, if there's something that's not reflected the way it was intended, we can certainly work with that. So I'll continue that tour north along State Road 85, and you can see that there's a handful of capacity projects in the Racetrack area as well. So coming up State Road 85, that has a number of different projects along it, but there's from a capacity standpoint, as well as the complete street standpoint. So you'll see both of those identified as we discuss it. And you can also see, and I'm zooming in a little closer, hopefully it becomes more visible, intersection projects such as Antioch and Crabapple, PJ Adams, and State Road 85 Fenton, the interchange at I-10, and the intersection at Garage. So just some of those highlights from the need plan. I'll continue to pan northward so we can see it in detail throughout Crestview, but additional intersection projects, the trail along US 90, capacity for the northwest quadrant of the Crestview Bypass West. Another thing to highlight, if you're looking at this on your own at another time, is for some of these projects, we have given them an A and a B fashion. The idea is that there's ultimately one project, but those are two of the alignments that have been placed on there in the past, so that you can see that there's some flexibility in the way that need is achieved. Then finally, I'll zoom in that one of the needs that was brought up through this process is connecting better pedestrian connections for Crestview High School up to the connecting Old Bethel Road and Airport Road corridors. So those are some of the needs. I'm backing out away again and see if it's recovering with me. One of those bigger pieces is this E plus C. You may have seen some of the dark roads as we went along, but those are ones that are in our existing plus committed that we believe will be built in the time frame independent of this needs plan. So we're kind of assuming them as existing corridors for our purposes. From existing priorities, we do have a couple of the intersection projects, as well as the eastern side bypass beltway. From a evaluation criteria, we have the complete streets on State Road 85. Again, that would be kind of an addition to what is moving through from this perspective. The interchange. And then multimodal, we also have the complete street state in that in the trail along US Marquee. So I know that took a few minutes. It was a long tour, bringing us back out to the high level. That hopefully that shed some light on what's in the plan today. These are the needs plan and the three scenarios. And those three scenarios, as Joe brought up, are developed with the intent of kind of fleshing out the philosophies and then allowing us to develop a hybrid scenario, which provides kind of the best of the priorities for the TPO to adopt. So Jill and Corey, if there's anything going on in the room to address question-wise, otherwise I'll hand it back to you.
Is there anyone here in the group that has a question or two for Michael or for Corey at this time?
So the one scenario of the previous cost feasible, really, Walton we just weren't here with projects, and we're really disadvantaged. I think when we look at that scenario, so there's one scenario that's capacity based, and then another one that's multimodal. I'm understanding. Then the idea is to take the hybrid of all three of those, right?
I would say that not capacity based.
Okay.
Hey, Matt, let me interject for just a minute. So the three scenarios that we're considering, the first one is the priorities, which is based on your adopted priorities that you adopted in June of this year. So that's a set list of priorities that has been approved. So we take that and we see how many we can fund on the list. The second scenario is based on the evaluation criteria that this TPO adopted as well. So we applied that evaluation criteria. We did get most of the mobility plan projects in there and reran the evaluation criteria scores. And so there were some changes. Some of those projects came on the list now because of that evaluation criteria score. And then the third scenario is a multimodal scenario that emphasizes transit and complete streets. Now, what we do is we take all of those and use those three to build the fourth one that you'll take action on, which is the hybrid scenario. We also have the opportunity in that hybrid scenario, though, we look to see what's bubbled up to the top based on those other three scenarios. But we can also add things into that fourth scenario, even if they didn't make one of these three lists, just based on priority needs, what's important. So that's what we're doing right now with that fourth scenario, is seeing what needs to be in there based on these three and anything that might have been left out.
Hopefully there'll be a time, I think Chance and I and Anna should sit down with you got the consulting team and really start to drill down some of this stuff, just to make sure that we're communicating the way we should, because I don't know what I'm doing. And we're trying to catch up here with, make sure we're using the right terms and have everything in there appropriately. So that we'll look forward to that.
Okay, go ahead, Jill or Matt.
I think that's everything.
Any further comments from anyone in the committee? Anyone in the audience? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. On H, you see we have a lot of informational items. They're enclosures for all the committees. We won't go through those. You have the list. In other business, our next meeting is December the 9th at the South Walton Annex Boardroom, 31 Coastal Center Boulevard in Santa Rosa Beach. This committee will meet at 1:30 p.m. And at this point, hearing no further.
Madam Chair, if I could just say one thing real
Sure.
quick. Most all of you know that we have our transportation symposium. Some of you are registered for that. It is coming up November the 4th and 5th. I believe the room night rate may be going up after today. So if you do intend to spend the night at the Hilton Sandestin, please make arrangements. But we do always put on a good symposium. So I encourage you to go. If your local government has not asked you to go, ask them about going.
Thank you, Mary Beth. And with that one plug for the symposium, I will call this meeting adjourned.